Good afternoon, everybody. First on after lunch, is that a good place to be? At least lunch is out like they were. I'm talking to some people about what lunches used to be in the 1980s. We'd all had a few beers by that stage, and you would be all asleep, so at least you're awake. Yeah. So my role, I'm a director of an organisation called the Supply Chain School, and within that we have a section where we look at off-site management skills. And so on the skills agenda, we're looking at the skills that managers in the industry need, and more about that in a moment. I'll explain more about what the school does as I go through my presentation. But my title I was asked to speak to is Addressing the Skills Gap in Off-Site Construction. So that assumes there is a skills gap. This off-site management school, as you see there, offsiteschool.co.uk is where you go to find out more about it. But is there a skills gap? Okay, hands up if you can operate one of these. Okay, there's a bit of a skills gap then, isn't there? Yeah, okay. So interesting though, actually a couple of our members have already recruited their first robot operators. People can program robots going forward. So, you know, new jobs are beginning to actually appear. Hands up if you've ever used one of these. Increasing efficiency on site, turning people into half a robot, which is interesting. Very interestingly, the same technology is being used by Olympic skiers to get themselves back into skiing afterwards by supporting their knees going forwards, which is very interesting. And so, making our people more efficient, which is interesting. Well, got more of a chance of operating these. If you go into if you're looking at people like JCB, etc., are looking at how do you make those machines completely driverless. But I want to say they're robotized, or actually you're taking the driver out of the cab and you're putting them in a different environment completely. So. Do you know what? My kids can operate one of these because they could operate one of these at home in front of the PlayStation because they've got absolutely the right skills to actually operate these going forwards, and they can be in a nice warm environment somewhere. So actually the industry is has the potential to become more attractive going forward. Equally, my kids can handle one of these as well, drones. Drones have been used. We have a number of companies in the school who are FM companies who are already using drones. But let's move on from how we use drones to actually helping within the building rather than just a building maintenance process. But again, the skill sets that we require to do these are very different from the skill sets that the people have at the moment. What we try to do within the Offsite school is to look at an industrialisation mindset. Now, the interesting thing about this, nobody's put their hands up yet, so either you are all asleep or you don't have any of the skills. So today we've been talking about offsite manufacturing, haven't we? Yeah. So hands up or stand up if you're a manufacturer who you've got a manufacturing capability. Stand up if you have. Yeah. So we got. 3 people in the room who are manufacturers. Excellent. So, sit down, okay. Stand up if you're a designer, because what comes before that is the design process, yeah? So, this will help with the networking bit later on. Excellent. I'm getting you to stand up and down, which is good, yeah? So, we've got designers, okay, excellent. You can sit that down now. Just make sure you're awake, that's all it is, yeah? Logistics. Any logistics companies in the room? Yeah, you can stand up more than once in this exercise, it's really good. Yeah, well, he's doing well, yeah, excellent, logistics. Okay. On site. So, is he standing up again? So, you're on site, you're working on site, you're responsible. You are a contractor. Mr. Carillion might be standing up at this stage. But Carillion do. We're answering from your company. Yeah? So we've got on-site processes. But also, Mr. Carillion, you look after the product, the building once it's been built, don't you? Yeah, I was going to get him started. I was going to get Ken stood up at some time during the afternoon, which is good. So, what we need to understand is what is the skills gaps in each of these areas. Because interestingly, I was at an advanced manufacturing college in Sheffield last week, and we often talk about the fact that we've got a skills gap in the off-site industry because we need to manufacture much more efficiently than we are currently. The very interesting thing is that manufacturing colleges, advanced manufacturing colleges, are already teaching those skill sets. So the skill set we need to be tapping into there is not the traditional construction skill set, it's the advanced manufacturing skill set. So we need to go to something like the Sheffield Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, where McLaren are, where Rolls-Royce are, where et cetera, and that's the skill set that we need to be tapping into there. So actually, in terms of provision and skills gap, there isn't a gap in the skills in terms of making our factories better and more efficient, because We're just not recruiting them and adopting the skills into our own industry. So there's a challenge out there about how we apply those the relevant skills into the industry and how we go out and attract that talent. It exists, the courses exist, and the technologies and the processes exist. Move back one then, because actually before we get to understanding what we want to manufacture, we've got to go back one step. We've got to go back to the design stage. So there's great to have the designers in the room, because the designers, big question for the RIBA, big question, isn't there? That, what is an architect going to do going forward? And I think a lot of architectural practices need to understand, are they concept architects or are they technical architects? Are they responsible? It's good to get that little bit of electronic feedback. Or was it a wolf whistle? It's like I haven't had a wolf whistle for many years, ever, to be honest. And again, Matt Farmer said this morning, didn't he? Do architects have the technical capability to design the process of building? Because not only do we need to start, we've put up here design, product and process. So we've got to design the building itself, but we've actually got to design the process by which we're going to build the building. And there is a substantial skills gap there. Most architects you talk to just don't have that skill set at all. Engineers have got to understand whether they want it. Some full service architects believe they've got it, but a lot of architects are very happy at that concept stage, and somebody mentioned this morning that they were very happy to stop at stage 3 and then hand over. So where are we going to do that? So we need to understand there is a massive skills gap there within the design profession. There is a skills gap when we get down to logistics, because when we start looking at those different size panels that we're going to bring in, or the modules that we're going to bring in, Stuart was talking about huge modules that we're bringing in. We saw in the SIP panels, much bigger SIP panels. It's not like a timber wagon arriving with, or a brick, a wagon with lots of small bricks and what have you, where we're unloading them and stacking them on site. We're asking people to deal with much bigger assemblies on site. So your logistics skills have got to change completely. We've also got to get a stage where we're looking at just-in-time logistics as well, where things are delivered to site. So we've got a very well programmed, site which is run really well, but actually materials are delivered just in time, just like they are in the car industry. That's a struggle, because when they are delivered as well, we need to know how to transship them off the truck and then put them into place. Yeah, because if we've got a module which is how many meters long was it again?
Well, they go up to 18 meters long by 5 meters wide.
So there's not many sites we're going to have where we can store those on the site, waiting for them to lift them into position. And we wouldn't want to do that because we're double handling. And in any process where we're double handling, we've got quality issues, we've got cost issues, we've got time issues, we've got inefficiency issues. So we're going to need to work that out. So that then fits into our on-site process. And what we were learning before the break is that we have to de-skill that on-site process. Do we? There's a bit of a challenge around that. But perhaps we do have to de-skill that on-site process because otherwise, we're not going to get the quality that we actually want. That doesn't mean to say if we de-skill it, we can that we're not asking for the quality. If you look at car industries and other industries, by designing a process which designs in the quality from right at the beginning is what we need to do. We need to understand how to create a process where the skill is taken out of it, but the quality is actually embedded into it, which is a very different process from what we have currently on the construction site. The example of GSK, and if you look at what Bryden would have done there with GSK and factory in a box, you'll see that you have color-coded components which can be put together, and it just makes it so much simpler where you can get somebody literally off the street starting constructing things because you're designing a different process of construction, which is why when you come back to the process of design for manufacture and assembly. So when we talk about offsite, and offsite outlooks is the title for today, we shouldn't just be looking at offsite. We need to be looking really at this phrase, design for manufacture. So we're going back to the design stage right at the beginning. Design for manufacture in the offsite process, and assembly. How are we going to assemble that on site? Rather than construct it on site, how are we going to assemble it on site? And that's where it's really important, that phraseology. And we've been working with RIBA recently to actually offer an overlay to the RIBA planner work, to have a DFMA overlay to say to architects what they should do on what stage, and to make the business case for actually doing that. But of course, we should also be designing for best-in-class maintenance going forward, because that's obviously really, really important to the owners of the building going forward. And we saw with the Bovis example as well that, reputationally that can have a big effect on you. Sitting underneath all of those 5 industrialisation elements. So just going back when we had the 5 industrialisation elements, which are the ones you see there. Sitting underneath those are some very soft management skills that all managers need. It's about getting the right culture in your organisation, about having the right leadership skills in your organisations to lead change. There's a big challenge this morning about how do you lead change. We need to have the right management skills to manage a change process. How do we manage change for our businesses? We're in a kind of generational change for our business, but if we don't accept that and we don't have a change management process in, how are we going to get that behavioural change? As an industry, if you look at health and safety, we went through a change management process which started in the 1970s and is still going on now. But we've had to appoint people to do that. We've had to have leadership to do that. We've got to have innovation in our industry, and when we look at the amount of money that we spend on R&D as an industry is very, very small indeed. But by innovation can be the adoption of new processes. It's not always about creating the new technologies, because many of those technologies already exist. It doesn't just have to be about product innovation, it has to be about process innovation as well. In other words, how you put the things together. We're going to need to collaborate more, which kind of underpinned my question to our friend from Kingspan at the back, to say, right, actually, are we working, we're creating the SIP panel, but are we working with the people providing the cladding, the windows and whatever? So actually, I can just buy a whole unit from you rather than just buying the SIP panel, because that's actually going to make it much more efficient on site. I'm not going to have any working at height on site, etc., etc., etc. So but that will take collaboration, because you like to say, well, actually, we don't make windows, etc., etc. So that collaboration, the ability to collaborate, and you're seeing major, if we look at different sectors of our industry, if you look at infrastructure, the clients there are now saying that actually if you're working on our projects, we need you to have the British standard for collaboration. So you've got to have BS 11,000 to actually work on our projects. So when you look at Network Rail, etc., they're asking about Highways England, they're asking for those standards. We've got to have the right quality management. And by quality management, I do not mean ISO 9001. For obvious reasons. It's been hanging around since BS 5750, but by quality management, what I mean is looking at manufacturing levels of quality management, where we're looking at Japanese techniques in there to actually look at how we improve our quality far beyond just having a quality management process in place, but we're looking at the number of failures have in the parts per million rather than in the amount of failures we have in the parts per 100. We've got to have much better project management skills, and we need the ability to set the business case as well, which is really important. And the final soft skill we really need is a skill around supply chain management. How do we manage the supply chain? Currently, I'm sorry for any contractors in the room, currently the state of supply chain management by major contractors is very poor indeed. There's some major contractors who still do the majority of their spend, and bearing in mind they might turn over £1 billion or £2 billion, and they've got a procurement team which is no more than a handful of people, and QSs do most of the procurement. It's just spot buying, it's not procurement. The industry is on a spectrum, and it needs to go from that kind of QS buying, where you got a buyer, then you move to procurement, where you're getting slightly more sophisticated about it. Then you move to supply chain management, where you're actually managing the supply chain effectively, working in partnership with them much closer. Then eventually you move right over here, where you're looking at supply chain development, where you'll be working very, very closely with your supply chain. They're developing you, you're developing them, but you're working in partnership with them. Again, sorry to do the car analogies to death, but 100 years on from that, from the Model T Ford, if you're a lighting, if you make the lighting modules for the new Mondeo, you'll be embedded at the design stage. And the success of that Mondeo, your part of that will be making sure the lights are successful, and you'll be embedded at the design stage, and you'll tool up on that basis, etc., etc. If the car's successful, you'll be successful, yeah? Part of my team come from the automotive industry, cannot understand why that doesn't happen. Clearly it doesn't happen. Those manufacturers in the room, how many of you are embedded into the design process with the architects? Doesn't happen. Okay, so I think we established we have got a gap in skills. So what's my next slide going to say? So where and how do we start? Let's put up this little model. It's a little model we use quite a lot within our organisation when we're talking to clients. There's some fundamentals which we need to understand within our organisations. The fundamentals are what's driving us to change. And somebody said in the break to me, "Oh, it depends on what demand is." It shouldn't depend what demand is. Going back to the Henry Ford model, do we demand that our car is built by robots in a factory in Oxford? We don't, do we? We don't care. We demand that we have a car which is good value for money, it's got all the extras on, it's very safe, allows me to personalise it in the way I want, etc., etc. I don't care how it's built, I don't know how it's built, but I want to be able to pick that it's pink with blue seats. That's what I want. So the drivers are not about demand. Drivers for me have got to be about return on investment, which is why we're seeing a lot of investment funds coming into the industry. They're looking for a better return on the investment than they get currently. And I've also got to be the driver for the profit that we make as an industry. As an industry, we make very, very small margins, and there's a lot of risk involved in making very small margins. So we've got to be looking at how can we make better margins as an industry. Yeah? So we understand our organisational drivers, and we'll come on to that in a moment about some little tools we use which might help you. Then we've got to have the right policy and strategy within our business. What is our DFMA strategy as an organisation? We might talk about it, but actually, how are we going to embed it as a strategy and roll that out as across our organisation? But it's no good just rolling it out across our organisation, because most of us will have significant supply chains, and if we don't change the way we procure to develop those supply chain management functions and have the right strategy with our supply chain, yes, as a major contractor, getting much more embedded with their specialist subcontractors and the trades that they work with, so they're working as a team, is going to be really important going forward. Unless we get that right procurement strategy in place, we're not going to be successful. So those fundamentals have to exist before you start looking at the next stage, which are what I call the enablers. And there's 5 building blocks of which I call enablers, which we all need to have. One is leadership and governance. That leadership, how have we got the right leadership in our organisation to be successful? The next one, which the school deals with, is people. What are the skill sets that our people need? Because if we don't understand about how to deliver an off-site solution, how are we ever going to actually deliver that effectively for our clients? This next part is really important. It's a risk and opportunity analysis, and that is, what's the opportunity to look at smart construction techniques with any client or any project? And that's what we need to do. We need to have a process where when the opportunity comes in, we start looking at that straight away. What's the opportunity and what are the risks associated with taking this different approach? And we need to have a process for doing that. We've got to have an engagement exercise to how do we engage with our supply chain, because that's linking back to here, because unless we engage effectively with our supply chain, we won't be successful. We need to measure. We need to measure the level of our off-site uptake or adoption as well, and I'll get onto some techniques how we can do that as well. So, in terms of measurement then, what percentage of construction is off-site? Hands up if you think it's 10%. Hands up if you think it's 25%. Hands up if it's 50%. Hands up if it's 75%. Hands up if you think it's 100%. Where am I going with this? Well, name me a construction site where you get all the materials where you dig them out of the ground and you actually build it. You don't, do you? There were an exception to that. There was a grand designs program the other day where somebody was living in a forest. Did anybody see it? He was living in a forest. He got all the materials that he wanted for building his from the forest, with the exception of some his kitchen units and his utility units. So he's probably up at the 75% level. My point is that all the materials which arrive on site are manufactured off-site. All the people who come to the site are from off-site. Currently, everything is off-site anyway. And we have this big debate in the industry about what percentage is off-site. Hey, it's all off-site. So we're not actually looking at off-site. We're looking at how to change what's coming to site So I've got some questions for you. So if we're looking to change, so we need to look at what I call an adoption scale. Because at the one end, we've got a traditional build, and at the other end, we've got a completely modular build, yeah? And we've had examples of that this morning. And we need to understand, as a designer, as a main contractor, where we are on this adoption scale. So are we just buying a component? Are we buying a brick? A brick is a component, or it could be a specialist bracket like we've got there. Or are we buying a kind of a sub-assembly? And people will recognise that type of sub-assembly. We've got some ventilation ducts which are coming together as a sub-assembly, which are assembled before they arrive at site, and you bolt them together. Or we're looking at a volumetric pre-assembly. So it's been pre-assembled before we arrive at site. Or we're looking at a volumetric assembly where we're actually looking at putting things together in here's got an M&E module, or we're looking at a full module assembly. So we've got a whole range, you know, in terms of an adoption scale. And we as an industry need to understand which one of those approaches or which hybrid of those approaches are we going to use. So we need to have the skill set to do that. One of the things we do with organisations we're working with is we go do these little radar charts to try to understand what's driving. First of all, from a client driver, what's driving the client? Because if speed of construction is required, in other words, you've only allowed X amount of time on site, it could be, for instance, you're building ski chalets which have to be built in a 6-month window. Because they can't be built in the winter, they can only be built in that 6-month window. So what do? Most of the stuff comes in a module and it's assembled together very easily as a result. So speed of assembly, if you only got a small amount of time inside, that might drive you to a more modular approach. Cost might drive you. Quality, we talked about quality, it's a quality and ensuring that the tenant is going to be looking after it in the long term, where we can we can understand what the quality levels are going to be going forward is really important. Is health and safety driving? Because if we can eliminate working at heights by having that fully clad SIP panel, so we don't have the working at heights, that's going to improve the health and safety on site. Waste, is waste driving? Value. Community impact. What do I mean by community impact? You know, if we're on site for somebody mentioned before about 3.5 months less, well, that's a lot less impact on the local community. Potentially you're going to have a lot less visits to site as well. Even though the modules are coming in bigger, you've got less modules actually being delivered to site than lots and lots of trucks delivering smaller and smaller elements of components to site. So that's less community impact as well. So understanding the client drivers is important. Then you move on to understanding the project drivers. Because you might well be working with a client that's absolutely wedded to a DFMA approach, an offsite approach, but you might you might then go onto a site, then in actual fact, the logistics say you just can't get a truck which will carry a 15-metre, 5-metre wide module down that road. It just won't happen. So, you know, that happens a lot, especially in central London and things like that. We can't get the modules to site. So the site access and logistics might say, well, we've got to discount that. We can't go for a modular approach. We're going to have to go back to our SIP panels, whatever it might be, and look for an approach that we put together. Then you might say, well, actually, we can't do that either because we're not allowed to put up a crane because we're right next to a railway, and the railway says if the cost of putting up a crane next to a railway is too much money because of all the potentials for closing down the railway if it all goes wrong. So seasonality, I told about the ski example. Yeah, skills availability. Hinkley Point. How on earth are we going to find the 10,000 people in Hinkley Point to build it in Bridgewater in Somerset? We're just not going to find them. So we need to have a different approach. You know, people like Lang O'Rourke with a kind of a precast concrete approach where they can build much bigger modules and build them to site. They're reducing the amount of labour which is required on site. And very interestingly, they're getting it manufactured in an area where there's higher unemployment, etc., etc. So the economic value to the client is much better as a result. Government will love that because there's no point overheating the economy in Bridgewater when we've actually got a load of people unemployed in Worksop or wherever it might be. So understanding that is really important. So using a model like this really can help people to understand, you know, what approach they should be taking and where on that adoption scale you should actually be, which is really important. So we've had a look at some tools which might help you to understand how do you get your fundamentals and how do you get your building blocks right in terms of enablers. And then we talked about a couple of little tools which can help you in terms of where you fit on that DFMA adoption scale. The next thing is how can the skill help you in terms of giving you some of the skills which fit within those 5 outer elements of industrialisation and within those soft skill sets as well. Well, the Skills an online learning environment funded totally by the industry, by these 53 different clients, all fund the school to educate the supply chain around a number of subjects, of which Offsite is one. The very interesting thing is when you go into the school, we ask you to take an assessment. We ask you to assess where your skills currently are as a business, not as an individual, but as a business. So we ask you a series of questions depending on what type of organisation you are. You can ask very different questions. If you're an architect, you can ask a lot more questions about design than you would be if you're a trade company. But we'll ask you a series of questions which deal with the 5 elements of industrialisation and also deal with the those 8 elements of core management skills you require. Once you've done your assessment, very easy to do. I'll think a little bit there. Once you've done your assessment, you'll find that you're going to get a link to knowledge, which, for instance, are offsite processes. We're going to ask you, do you understand about lean techniques within your factory? Do you understand about the 7 tools of quality? Do you understand about quality assurance? Do you understand about process capabilities? And from a design point of view, we're asking about design for manufacturing and assembly. We're understanding, do you know about component libraries? Do you understand about failure mode effect and cause analysis? Do you understand about the concepts of designing for safety? These are the types of concepts that we're dealing with. And from logistics, we're looking at just-in-time delivery, we're looking at containerization, supply chain development, manufacturing resource planning, bills of material, all these types of concepts which are very familiar within the manufacturing sector, but not as familiar within the construction sector. When we talk about on-site processes, we're talking about time study, we're talking about industrial engineering, we're talking about process element analysis. Doesn't happen within construction companies at the moment, because what we're trying to do here is take the techniques that you use to improve the process of assembling a car or a rocket or whatever it might be, a manufactured good, and say, take those processes and those management techniques and apply them to the process of assembling something on a construction site. And finally, we look at what's in terms of best-in-class maintenance. What are the skills we need there? And that's about mean time to failure, mean time to repair. It's about condition-based monitoring. It's about embedded sensors, etc., so we know when components are going to fail going forward. So the school then gives you an action plan. It's completely free of charge for any manufacturers. Anybody who wants to join the school can join. It's, as I say, it's paid for by our partners. But if you want to be a member, no cost associated. You get an action plan, which is 10 things to do. That links you to a resource library full of resources, e-learning modules, loads of films and videos in there, which you can access as well. Get things like this here, which you can download, the REBA Plan of Works, which for DFMA, which we developed recently and was launched back in September. Lots more in terms of the resource library. We see lots of films you can see there. Client's perspective on design for manufacturing assembly, efficiency, quality. We talk about all these issues, and what we tried to do is, rather than just giving you lots to read, you can just get your iPad out, your mobile phone out, put your earphones in and listen and learn and take e-learning modules all online, just trying to make it easy to access the knowledge that you want. Okay. And then what you really importantly get as well, you get a dashboard. You get a dashboard which enables you to track the knowledge which is in your organisation, where your weaknesses are, how you benchmark against others within your trades as well. Now the benchmark at the moment has benchmarked about 500 different organisations who've taken the assessment. It enables you to benchmark against those other organisations. You can't say, if you're Kingspan, you can't find out how your competitors are doing. You can find within your trade sector what the average score is. Yeah, so we're not giving away your details to everybody, but whatever you score yourself stays completely confidential, because we're just interested in increasing the knowledge base within the supply chain. Okay, so to get online, go to supplychainschool.co.uk or offsiteschool.co.uk, get online and you'll be able to access all the knowledge that we have. Thank you very much for your time.